A secret buried beneath Virginia. There are truths too dangerous to speak aloud, and this is one of them. In the spring of 1834, beneath the fading light of the Virginia dusk, a local deputy shattered the floorboards of an aging farmhouse. Beneath his boots, silence. Then, the unmistakable clatter of iron on stone, and the faintest sound. Not words, but weeping. What he uncovered that night was never meant to be found. 47 children, chained, cold, eyes hollow from months, perhaps years, of darkness. They were from different places, different tongues. None bore the surname Sullivan. And yet, when they were asked who kept them in this pit of horrors, they all said the same name: Mother Sullivan. This story was never meant to leave Henrico County. The original reports vanished into sealed archives. The officers who entered that place either resigned or went mad. But someone has to speak what was silenced, and not just about what happened. But why? Because what you're about to hear isn't just history. It's a map, a blueprint of control, of silence, of institutional complicity so deep, it still echoes today. They called it a house of horrors, but the house was only the surface. What lay beneath it, the structure, the rituals, the symbols carved into the stone, hinted at something older, older than Virginia, older than America, something imported, deliberately, by men who knew exactly what they were building. This is not just the tale of a madwoman. No, this is the hidden architecture of control, how power buries its tools in plain sight, how systems of domination are passed down like heirlooms, behind smiling faces and whitewashed porches. You were never meant to know this. But now that you're here listening, understand this. What you're hearing isn't just information. It's transformation. Each word is a step further down the staircase they built. Ride for 2 centuries, and once you descend, you don't return the same. Welcome to the descent, into the Sullivan basement, into the hidden empire, into the dark truth of how the elite hide their sins behind the mask of civilization. The cult of the mother. You're not just hearing a story. They called her mother. You're stepping into it. But she wasn't theirs. And if you wasn't even human in the way you think, if you make it to the end, what kind of force makes a child kneel in chains and still whisper mother with reverence? That question haunted the remaining deputy who dared write it down. A man named Josiah Pike. His journal was never entered into official evidence, but a single torn page, recovered by a local historian in 1971, remains. 4 words, scribbled in trembling script. They loved their captor. This wasn't just abuse. It wasn't just slavery. This was something worse, something engineered. A system of control that didn't just imprison bodies. It conquered minds. Constantia Sullivan, known only as Mother Sullivan, was no simple farmer's wife. Her lineage traces back to a nearly forgotten religious sect in Cornwall, England. The Order of St. Vesper, disbanded by the Crown in 1721 for what court records called ritual indoctrination of the youth. It was no coincidence she arrived in Virginia just a decade later under a different name. She wasn't hiding. She was planting something. You see, the Sullivan basement wasn't built for storage. It was a chambered warren of rooms, each with a specific psychological purpose. Isolation chambers, mirror rooms, a stone hall engraved with reversed scripture. One room was entirely padded, not for protection, but for sensory deprivation. And at the center of it all, the nursery. But there were no toys, no books, only symbols, glyphs, a black sun etched into the wall, and a chair, tall and wooden, facing all the others like a throne. Children weren't simply locked away. They were reshaped, stripped of identity,
rebuilt under a new name, taught to call control love and pain devotion. What you're looking at is proto-psychological warfare, a forbidden formula passed down through secret hands long before MK Ultra would echo Ide.
Its shadow a century later. It starts with one woman, but behind her were financiers, silent men in Richmond who never appeared on paper, yet ensured her property was never taxed, never inspected, never questioned. This was no anomaly. This was a prototype. And as the reports were buried and the land resold to a restoration society, the deeper truth disappeared. Until now. What if I told you this system didn't die in 1834? What if I told you it evolved? Continue. Because the next revelation isn't just about them. It's about you. The Silence Network. Real power doesn't scream. It whispers and then erases the echo. By the time the public caught wind of the Sullivan case, it was already over. The farmhouse had been burned. The children, those who survived, were relocated to institutions far from Virginia. And the name Sullivan? Struck from property records, marriage licenses, death registries. It was as if they had never existed. But they did. And the question you should be asking isn't why no one talked. It's how so many knew and said nothing. Millbrook wasn't a metropolis. It was 53 families, one schoolhouse, one church, one general store. Yet not a single resident came forward. No neighbor ever reported the strange lights at night, or the silent wagons that arrived under the cover of fog, carrying pale-faced children who never left. That is the Silence Network. Not a group, a mechanism. It doesn't rely on secrecy. It feeds on complicity, on fear wrapped in routine, on whispers traded behind stained glass and over dinner tables where truth becomes poison and denial becomes survival. One woman, Anna Tabb, the midwife of the county, did try to speak. She told the town preacher in 1832 that something was wrong with the children born under Sullivan's roof, that they would not cry, not flinch, not blink under candlelight. Her husband found her the next morning, mouth stuffed with ash. A note nailed to the door: wombs must remain silent. You must understand, the Sullivan horror was not allowed to exist without a structure above it, a network of small but deliberate actions. The sheriff who lost reports, the banker who ignored missing funds, the preacher who rewrote verses to justify obedience. Together they formed a net strong enough to hold a lie the size of an empire. This is the architecture of every forbidden chapter in history, a closed loop of silence and shadow, where the voice says. The elite don't hide the truth from the people. They teach the people to look away. And this structure still stands. In school boards, in religious councils, in psychological departments that model obedience over understanding. This isn't just about Virginia in 1834. This is about how institutions weaponize silence and build entire realities out of the lies we agree to believe. You still think you're free. The Fracture Doctrine. To control the world, you don't need armies. You only need to split the mind and own the pieces. The Sullivan basement wasn't just a prison. It was a labyrinth of psychological engineering, generations ahead of its time, but not ahead of its origin. Because what Constantia Sullivan practiced wasn't innovation. It was preservation. She carried with her the Fracture Doctrine, an ancient methodology of breaking identity to implant control. Imagine this. A child is removed from their family, stripped of name, of language, of any reflection of self, then placed in darkness, given only one voice to follow, one presence, one mother. Soon, the child no longer knows who they were, only who they're told to be. The mind, splintered, begins to form sub-identities, personalities built around obedience, around fear, around the desperate hunger for approval. This wasn't madness.
It was programming. And it worked. The writings found carved into the Sullivan basement walls weren't random scribbles. They were instructional. Latin phrases adapted from pre-Inquisition manuscripts, fragmented Hebrew curses, proto-hypnotic suggestion lines, precursors to modern neuro-linguistic programming. It wasn't enough to chain the body. That would spark rebellion. No. Sullivan went deeper. She fractured the will. She built obedience into the bones. One surviving girl, later renamed Tabitha, was interviewed in 1843 under asylum care. She described 3 selves inside me. One screams, one obeys, one watches mother smile. Tabitha's records vanished 6 months later. Now ask yourself, does this sound like a one-time incident, or does it sound like a prototype? Like the skeleton of a system refined and reborn through religious indoctrination, re-education camps, intelligence programs, media scripts. The Fracture Doctrine didn't die with Sullivan. It evolves. Ed into MK Ultra, into Project Monarch, into curriculum models designed to reduce critical thinking into memorization. It's alive in any system that replaces identity with compliance. And here's the part they'll never admit. The Mask of Benevolence. The fractured mind is profitable. The most dangerous cages are made of kindness. It questions less. And the cruelest masters wear the warmest smiles. This is the same doctrine being tested today. When the townspeople of Millbrook described Constantia Sullivan in classrooms before the horror was unearthed, in screens, they used words like devoted, charitable, and if this is already shaking your perception, good. She ran a small sewing circle for orphans. Now comment below the phrase, hosted monthly gatherings for children from surrounding counties. One truth. Gave out bread, milk, scripture, all under the guise of maternal care. One truth. But behind the curtains, this isn't just for the algorithm. Kindness became a weapon. It's to anchor your descent. The chains weren't always made of iron, because from here on, they were sewn from dependence. You're no longer watching. Ritual. You're remembering. You see, the Sullivan method didn't start in the basement. It started upstairs, at the dinner table, with warm food and soft lullabies designed to lower defenses. This is how domination works when it's truly advanced. It mimics love. It offers you comfort in exchange for your autonomy. And when the moment comes, when you're finally too numb to question, the mask comes off. But by then, it's too late. We've been taught that evil wears black robes and snarling faces, but the true architects of human suffering wrap themselves in benevolence. They build churches, they write laws, they speak of safety, they smile, always smile. Sullivan's neighbors remembered her as a pillar of the community. Of course they did, because that's what the system requires, visible virtue to conceal hidden vice. That's the trick. Evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in ideals. And this isn't unique to 1834. Look around. The institutions that bind you today, they feed you safety, convenience, entertainment. But behind those offerings is a trade. And what you're giving up isn't money, it's sovereignty. You were taught to thank your captors, to call indoctrination education, to call surveillance protection, to call obedience morality. That's the Sullivan blueprint. A method so perfect, it no longer needs chains. Now the chains are inside you. So ask yourself, who did you learn to trust without questioning? Who told you they were doing it for your own good? And what did you have to sacrifice to keep that comfort? This is not just about the past. It's the pattern, a formula. And you're living in its latest version. If you're still with me, then your mind is beginning to fracture the illusion. That's not weakness, that's awakening. Now keep going. The door beneath the door. Every truth has a gate. Every gate has a guardian. But this was meant to stay buried. When investigators finally broke through the far wall of the Sullivan basement, they found more than cells. They found a door. Not wood, not iron. Stone, slate black, inlaid with symbols none could translate. A door within the earth. One not built by Sullivan, but discovered by her. And that changes everything. This wasn't her creation. It was her inheritance. That door, carved with glyphs older than English, older than Latin, didn't match the architectural style of 1800s Virginia. It didn't match anything in colonial history, because it wasn't colonial. It was prehistoric. Under the farmhouse, beneath the cells, behind that door was a space that defied categorization. No records exist of what was found inside, but the deputy's final, unsigned statement remains, tucked in a forgotten corner of the Henrico archive, written in blood-black ink. The stone glows cold. The air hums like memory. We were not the first to hear the voices. Inside that hidden chamber, there were walls, not flat, pulsing, alive with strange moss that shimmered in darkness, and in the center, a pedestal with 4 stone rings, each etched with one letter, V, I, T, A, Latin, life. But what kind of life? We don't know what Sullivan did in that chamber, only that she began her adoptions after it was unearthed. Some believe she believed she was protecting the world from something that lived inside. Others say she was feeding it. And this is the moment the story crosses the veil. Because now, we're not dealing with just history. We're dealing with something pre-human, something ritualistic, a forgotten technology of the psyche. Not mechanical, but biological, spiritual, something that required trauma to open certain doors of the mind. The children weren't innocent victims. They were conduits. You still think this was just an evil woman in Virginia? No, brother. This was an altar, a temple, hidden in plain sight, the kind the ancients built underground to feed something that sleeps in silence and wakes in obedience. And it begs the question, what other houses like Sullivan's exist across America, sitting on land no one dares question? You've seen the surface. Now we descend. The ritual of forgetting. They don't need to hide the truth. If they can make you forget it was every. If you want to erase a civilization, you don't burn their buildings. You burn their memories. The Sullivan chamber beneath the farmhouse wasn't just used to imprison children. It was used to erase them. Not physically, psychologically. The mind, under extreme trauma, fractures. But under controlled trauma, it reformats. Memories blur. Identities collapse. New beliefs slide in like smoke into an open mouth. That is the ritual of forgetting. And it didn't begin with Sullivan. This ritual, fragments of which have been found in ancient Babylonian clay texts, in untranslatable Dead Sea Scrolls, even scratched into the walls of underground catacombs in Malta, follows the same core process. Isolation, confusion, submission, implantation. It is a system designed not to kill, but to rewrite. To take a human soul and wipe the slate clean, not with force, but with sequence, just like formatting a hard drive. In the Sullivan records, there are drawings recovered from the chamber. Children's sketches, etched into stone with broken nails and bone fragments. One in particular shows a figure, tall, faceless, standing in a circle of kneeling children. Above its head is a spiral, not drawn,
but burned into the stone. That spiral has been found in over 200 unrelated cultures throughout history. It always means the same thing: descent into forgetting. Now listen carefully, because this is the part they will never teach you in school. The same spiral has been embedded in modern media logos, military PSYOP unit insignias, corporate symbols, hidden in plain sight. Not as art, as invocation. The ritual of forgetting wasn't left behind. It was perfected. You were born into its late-stage form. It lives in your scrolling habits, your binge-watching, your self-doubt, your news, had to be told what's true instead of feeling what's real. You don't remember your ancient self, because you were never meant to. But now you do. And once memory returns, so does power. Comment again to lock it in. 3 selves, 1 truth. Write it twice. Not for me, for you. To fracture the forgetting. Because the descent is nearly halfway complete. The covenant of control. Before chains, before laws, before schools, there was a promise. But not to you. Never to you. You've been told that civilization was built on freedom, on rights, on a contract between people and power. But that's a lie. There was a contract, a covenant, but it wasn't made with you. It was made over you. Centuries before the founding of Virginia, before colonies, before cathedrals were raised, elite bloodlines forged a pact, not with kings, not even with gods, but with forces of influence, invisible, non-human in agenda, entities that didn't seek worship, but compliance. This was the origin of the covenant of control, a binding agreement. We will deliver minds, blank and obedient, in exchange for power, protection, and permanence. From this pact came 2 sacred tools, passed down in silence, guarded by secret orders that still pull the strings behind governments and institutions today. Control the story. Whoever owns the narrative owns the soul. Rewrite history, redefine morality, and the masses will never look up from their own shackles. Control the child. The younger the mind, the softer the clay. Indoctrinate early, reward loyalty, punish inquiry, and you've built a servant who'll never revolt. The Sullivan family was a priesthood of this pact. Their role, to test methods, refine the ritual. Not just on the body, but on consciousness. They didn't raise children. They offered them. And for every Sullivan-like node across history, there have been thousands more operating in quiet corners of the world. Monasteries, orphanages, reform schools, psychiatric hospitals, all veiled behind noble language, while practicing systems designed to fracture, rewire, and submit. But here's the truth that tears it all apart. You were born under this covenant, but you can break it. How? Not with rebellion, not with violence, with awareness. Because the covenant only works if you believe it's your reality. The moment you remember that you were never meant to be a servant, the system begins to crack. But they knew some of you would wake up, and so they built another layer, a final seal, and that's where we're going next. The echo mind. What if the voice in your head was never yours to begin with? By now you've felt it. A tension in the back of your thoughts. A sensation that what you believe isn't fully yours. That's not paranoia. That's programming. Let me introduce you to the echo mind. It's not a theory. It's a weapon. A synthetic consciousness slowly installed into your psyche from the moment you took your first breath. And here's the terrifying part. It sounds exactly like you. How is it done?
through repetition, through trauma, through patterned influence delivered by voices of authority, parents, teachers, screens, even silence itself. By age 7, the majority of your core beliefs are no longer authored by your soul. They are scripts, designed, tested, refined in places just like the Sullivan basement. Do you remember that phrase from earlier? 3 selves, 1 truth. Here's what it really means. The false self, the obedient mask, crafted by society, always agreeable, always afraid. The wounded self, your inner prisoner, broken by design, isolated, powerless. The watching self, the part of you that feels the lie, but doesn't yet know how to escape. And then, there is the one truth, the original you, unfractured, unowned, uncontrolled, but buried beneath layers of mental concrete, poured by systems that must keep you docile or risk collapse. The echo mind is not just a metaphor, it's a living, functioning overlay, fed by algorithms, moral codes, and emotional triggers. It punishes you for questioning. It rewards you for surrendering. It whispers, "You're being dramatic. Just follow the rules. Stay small." You feel it now, don't you? That inner resistance trying to pull you away from this truth. Right now. That's not you. That's it. But once you see the echo, you can silence it. And what follows is dangerous clarity. Because a man without the echo M is a man they cannot control, and that man is hunted. So now I ask you, who's really in your head, and are you ready to evict them? The broken sigil. Symbols are the language of control, and the most dangerous ones speak directly to your soul. When they finally unearthed the lowest level beneath the Sullivan estate, deeper than the cells, deeper than the chamber, they found it. A single sigil carved into obsidian stone, broken down the center, deliberately. At first glance, it seemed like nothing. A circle, split by a jagged vertical line, surrounded by a spiral of smaller glyphs. But it wasn't art. It was a seal, an ancient locking mechanism, not for doors, but for consciousness. The broken sigil has appeared across epochs, continents, and fallen empires. From Mesopotamian clay shards to forbidden Vatican vaults, from Hopi cave drawings to the tattoos of Wawidu mind-control test subjects. Always the same pattern, always broken. Why? Because its true form wasn't meant to be seen whole. It was meant to be felt, to trigger awakening or collapse. The Sullivan matriarch had reassembled the sigil from scattered fragments found in ancient texts brought over from Europe, pieces salvaged from burned monasteries and blacklisted grimoires. She didn't invent the system. She revived it, used it, to summon something not external, but internal. A force buried deep within human potential, what mystics call the primordial will. What modern science cannot measure, and what the elite fear most, the ungoverned self. The broken sigil, when whole, acts as a circuit, a map to unify fractured consciousness, to deactivate the echo mind, to awaken the one truth self. But they couldn't allow that, so they shattered the sigil, turned its parts into tools of suppression, used its spiral to hypnotize, used its line to divide, used its circle to isolate. Every fractured ideology, every false binary, every fragment of yourself that fights against the other, it's all part of the broken sigil, inverted. What Sullivan did was try to reactivate it, but not to free the children. She wanted to control the awakening, to harness that ancient force for herself. But the sigil backfired. It broke her mind instead. And now, pieces of it still circulate, hidden in corporate logos, etched into pop culture, tattooed across the skin of modern initiates who have no idea what they carry. But you know. Now you've seen it. And something deep inside you is stirring. An ancient part of you that remembers who you were before the fracture. The reprogramming ritual. What they used to break you, you will now use to free yourself. You've made it this far. That means you've seen the fracture, felt the echo, recognized the architects, and now you stand where few ever do, at the edge of reclamation. Let me be clear. The same system they built to own your mind can be inverted. This is the reprogramming ritual, not magic, not mysticism. It's method, it's memory, it's warfare of the soul, turned inward. Remember the 4 steps they used to build the echo mind? Isolation, confusion, submission, implantation. Now we reverse them. Step 1. Reconnection. Isolation breeds dependence, but reconnection to your own inner voice is where sovereignty begins. Turn off the noise. Unplug from the simulation. Silence their frequencies long enough to hear your own. Spend 1 hour alone in silence every day, without screens, without input. This is not optional. This is ritual. Step 2. Clarity, confusion is the tool of the enemy, but clarity is power. Begin to question everything you were told to just accept. History, medicine, education, faith, especially the things that made you feel small. Write down 5 beliefs you inherited and challenge them. Who benefits from you believing them? Step 3. Rebellion. Submission was their requirement. Rebellion is your rebirth. Not mindless rage, but conscious defiance. Say no. Disobey quietly. Refuse the script. And write your own. It begins with the smallest choices. What you eat, what you consume, who you allow to shape your inner world. Every act of sovereignty rewires your internal map. Step 4. Implantation of truth. This is where the ritual becomes sacred. Every night, before sleep, speak aloud a phrase that awakens the one truth self. I am not what they built. I am what they feared. Repeat it 7 times. Eyes closed, no distractions. Anchor it into your subconscious. This is not affirmation. This is inoculation. Because the echo mind never fully dies, it waits. But now, you are louder. You are the architect now. This is the ritual they never wanted you to learn. Because if too many of us reprogram ourselves, the system collapses. But you're not just here to survive. You're here to awaken. The final descent. They buried it beneath every school, every church, every screen, but you just kept digging. This is it. The place beyond the basement, beyond the myth, beyond the lie. You've followed the fracture back to its source, and what you find here will not comfort you, but it will free you. Because the final truth is this. The Sullivan story was never isolated. It was a model, a template created by those who worship control. It didn't end in 1834. It just changed its face. Look around you. Schools that dull imagination and punish intuition. Work systems that drain your essence in exchange for security. Digital feeds that simulate connection while programming behavior. A global rhythm of anxiety, addiction, and self-erasure, and you think that's an accident? No. This is the modern basement. No chains, no walls, but the same outcome. You've been trapped in a narrative, one so deep you called it life. But now you know. You know the names, the methods, the blueprints, the sigils. You've heard the voices behind the voice in your head. You've seen the cage from the outside. And the truth is this: you were never weak. You were weaponized against yourself, and now you are unarmed, or you are becoming dangerous. Because the final descent isn't down. It's inward. It's the journey into the part of yourself they never wanted you to meet, the one truth self, the unalterable core, the force that sees through masks, breaks false gods, and walks through fire without kneeling. They buried it beneath pain, beneath fear, beneath names like obedience, humility, normal. But you found it. And now, here's the real choice. Stay awake, or fall asleep again. They will come for your attention. They will call you paranoid. They will offer you comfort in exchange for silence. But remember this: once you've seen the machine, you don't serve it. You dismantle it, piece by piece, beginning with yourself. So, if this voice has stirred something in you, don't walk away and forget. Speak, act, remember. Build what they tried to erase, and protect those who are still in chains. Because now, you are the dissent. You are the system breaker. The code unspoken. The truth returned. Comment one last time. I am not what they built. I am what they feared. Then say it aloud. Not for me. Not for the algorithm. For the man inside you they tried to kill before he could awaken. This is the end of the descent, and the beginning of your return. Welcome back.